They looked like the perfect family: 2 moms, 6 adopted children, and a life filled with smiles, matching outfits, and viral social media posts that inspired thousands. But behind those carefully crafted images was a dark, hidden reality, one filled with silence, control, and overlooked warnings. In 2018, their SUV was found at the bottom of a cliff on the California coast. All 8 lives were lost. What seemed like a tragic accident was soon revealed to be something far more chilling and intentional. This is the story of the Hart family, a thread of deceit that unraveled in the most devastating way. Subscribe to Uncovering Crime, and stay with us as we uncover the disturbing truth behind the illusion.
So, Highway 1 in California, March 2018. Imagine you're driving, taking that incredible ocean view, right?
Yeah, iconic.
And instead, you stumble upon something just deeply disturbing. An SUV completely flipped over, down at the base of this massive cliff, like 100 feet down.
And it wasn't just, a tragic accident scene. Inside were Jennifer and Sarah Hart, and with them, 3 of their adopted children, Abigail, Jeremiah, and Marcus.
But then comes this really chilling realization: 3 more children weren't there.
Right. Devontae, Hannah, and Sierra. They were missing. And the initial fear, the immediate thought was maybe they'd been swept out into the Pacific.
Which is horrifying in itself, but what hits you almost immediately is this profound contradiction.
Absolutely. Because publicly, to so many people who saw them, the Harts, they seemed like this ideal family.
The Hart tribe, they call themselves.
Exactly. They were seen as these really devoted mothers, kind of celebrated for this, seemingly inclusive way they were parenting 6 adopted Black siblings. And they were involved in activism, too. It's a very powerful image.
Oh, definitely. The picture they presented was so carefully put together, seemed so full of love, progressive values, all of that.
But then, as the details started trickling out, a totally different story began to emerge. A much, much darker reality.
Yeah, one involving repeated calls to Child Protective Services.
So our goal here in this deep dive is really try and unpack this whole tragedy.
We need to understand how that admired public face could hide so much suffering behind closed doors.
And what factors, based on the information we actually have, ultimately led to that awful scene on Highway 1.
Okay, so let's maybe start with Jennifer and Sarah themselves. Before they were this unit, this Hart tribe.
Good idea. Jennifer, she was born June 4th, 1979 in Huron, South Dakota.
And Sarah, interestingly, born just the month before, April 8th, 1979 in Big Stone City, also South Dakota.
In another parallel, both were the oldest of 3 kids in their families.
And their education, there was some overlap there too, wasn't there?
Yeah, they both started at one university, then transferred. Jennifer, she was focused on elementary education.
And Sarah was more into special education. You can sort of see maybe the seeds of wanting a big family there.
This is an interesting thought. Their relationship, though, it started fast, and they kept it secret initially.
Why was that? Fear of judgment.
Well, yeah. You have to remember the time. It really speaks to the kind of social pressure, the stigma same-sex couples faced back then.
Right. And maybe that experience, having to hide such a big part of themselves, maybe that contributed to them, building up this very controlled public image later on.
That's a really insightful point. It could well have. And when they did come out, sadly, they lost a lot of friends.
Which just shows you the climate they were in. So Sarah graduates in 2002. Jennifer leaves school to work.
And then 2004, they make this move together to Alexandria, Minnesota. Both got jobs at Herberger's, a department store.
And it's there they start living more openly as a couple.
That's right. And it's also around this time people started noticing, their different personalities coming through more clearly. Well, Jennifer was often described as, assertive. Some even said dominant, maybe controlling.
Okay. And Sarah?
More reserved, quieter, maybe passive is the word some used. And that dynamic, you have to imagine, really shaped the family environment later on.
Sure, and even back then, in those early years, there were some troubling signs about their caregiving abilities, weren't there?
You're thinking about the foster daughter incident in 2004.
Yeah, that really jumps out. It seems like such an early and honestly deeply concerning red flag.
It really does. They took in a 15-year-old girl, and there was talk, apparently, of them wanting to adopt more kids even then, building that big family image.
The same kind of narrative we see later.
Exactly, but then Really quickly, they started complaining about her to colleagues.
And then the really shocking part.
Yeah, they just dropped her off at a
Yeah.
therapist's office and never went back for her.
Wow. That's more than impulsive. It's a stunning lack of responsibility for a vulnerable kid.
And sadly, it kind of foreshadows this pattern, doesn't it? Making these huge decisions abruptly without seeming to think about the impact on others.
Okay, so let's fast forward a couple of years. The Hart tribe starts actually forming.
Right, 2006, Sarah legally changes her last name to Hart.
And then September of that year, they adopt the first group of siblings.
Correct. Abigail, Hannah, and Marcus from Texas.
Then 2 years later, 2008, the second group.
Devontae, Jeremiah, and Sierra. Also siblings from Houston this time.
And during this period, Sarah's still working outside the home, providing the income.
Yeah, she kept working. Jennifer stayed home, becoming the sort of central manager of this now quite large family.
And it's around then, 2008, that the public image starts to get its first real cracks.
It is. A teacher notices bruises on Hannah, and Hannah's explanation. Well, it's chilling. She said Jennifer hit her with a belt.
God, that's an awful early sign of what was likely already happening.
And it wasn't just physical marks. The school also reported the kids stealing food.
Eating from trash cans, even off the floor, that's not typical kid behavior.
Not at all. It screams that basic needs aren't being met, that they don't feel safe or provided for.
So Child Protective Services, CPS, they get involved because of these reports.
They do. You know, the CPS is the agency that's supposed to look into these kinds of allegations. Child abuse, neglect, make sure kids are safe.
But Jennifer and Sarah, what was their response?
Denial. Complete denial of any abuse. They blamed the food issues on trauma from the kids' birth families.
Which is a way to deflect, right, to shift blame away from what's happening in their house.
Precisely. And incredibly, despite these really clear warning signs, despite CPS being involved, no charges were filed then.
But they did pull the kids out of school.
They did, for over a year, which effectively just isolated them even more. No teachers, no outsiders seeing them regularly.
Okay, so then 2009, they get legally married in Connecticut.
And it's also important to mention, around this time, they started getting money from Texas. Subsidies for the adoptions, nearly $1,900 a month. Which adds, another layer to understanding the whole situation. The financial side.
Definitely. And at the same time, they're cutting ties with family.
Yeah, pulling away from their extended families. They said it was because they felt judged, criticized.
But it also served to increase that isolation, didn't it? Fewer people looking in, questioning things.
Absolutely. It became a key factor in how they could maintain control and keep what was really happening hidden.
So by 2010, the reports of abuse are getting more frequent and more serious.
We are. Abigail, who was only 6 then, she told someone Jennifer punched her and poured cold water on her.
As punishment for what?
For stealing a penny. A single penny. The punishment just seems wildly out of proportion.
Unbelievably so. And there were other incidents.
Yeah, another child seen at school with bruises. Sarah apparently explained it away as, just spanking. But given the pattern emerging...
it feels less and less like simple discipline.
Exactly. And what's really disturbing is when the police actually interviewed all 6 kids, their stories matched up.
They all talked about the spanking.
Yes, and the food being withheld systematically.
Yeah.
And being isolated as punishment, regularly.
So this wasn't just isolated incidents, it was a consistent pattern of abuse and control.
It points very strongly in that direction.
And this finally leads to some legal consequence.
It does. Sarah was convicted of misdemeanor domestic assault, got probation, community service.
You'd think that would be a wake-up call, a moment to force some kind of change.
You would hope so. But instead, their reaction seemed to be just dig in deeper, more isolation.
How?
They permanently pulled the kids from school, started homeschooling them.
Which effectively just cut off that last regular line of sight for teachers, counselors, anyone who might spot something was wrong.
Precisely. It removed a crucial layer of potential intervention.
Okay, so then 2013, they move again, this time to West Lynn, Oregon.
Right. Rented a house, had animals. On the surface, maybe it looked like a fresh start.
And they got involved in the local community, festivals and things.
They did. The family became sort of known in that, alternative festival scene. And this is when Jennifer's social media presence really exploded.
Ah, yes. The photos, the posts.
This is where that contrast, that gap between the public image and the private reality just becomes incredibly stark.
Yeah, her social media, it painted this picture, didn't it? Loving, progressive family, activism, road trips, yoga.
Just this image of harmonious, conscious living. It was so carefully curated, a total facade.
But underneath that glossy online version, people in Oregon were starting to have concerns too.
Oh, definitely. Multiple reports made to Oregon's Department of Human Services.
What were people saying?
People who actually interacted with them described the kids as seeming malnourished, almost robotic, scared, especially of Jennifer.
Robotic, that's unsettling.
Deeply. And the specific allegations made to child services were really disturbing. Things like the kids needed permission just to speak.
Seriously?
Yeah, and they weren't allowed to smile at dinner and faced really harsh punishments for tiny things.
Wow. What else?
A friend who actually visited the house described it like a military camp. Said there was no warmth, no nurturing feeling at all.
And that story about the pizza.
Oh, that was particularly awful, isn't it? The kids apparently only got one small slice each.
And when the rest was gone, they got punished.
Yeah, punished by having their next meal taken away.
Yeah.
And confined to bed for like 5 hours.
That level of control over food, it just shows such a disturbing power dynamic.
Absolutely. So child protection officers, they visit again because of these reports. They interview the kids.
And what happens? Do the kids say anything?
No. They deny any abuse. They say they're grateful for being adopted.
Uh-oh.
But the officers noted the kids showed basically no emotion when they said these things, which in itself can be a huge red flag in these situations. Coercion, fear.
Right. And what was Jennifer's explanation this time?
She basically played the identity card.
Yeah.
Said their parenting was just misunderstood because they were white lesbians raising black children.
Using race and sexuality to deflect the actual concerns about abuse?
It seems like a manipulative tactic, yeah.
Yeah.
And tragically, the case was closed. Lack of conclusive evidence, they said.
Another huge missed opportunity, looking back.
A massive one.
Then, 2014, that photo happens.
Ah, yes. The picture of Devante crying, hugging a police officer at a Black Lives Matter protest in Portland.
It went viral, didn't it? Became this huge symbol.
An incredible symbol of empathy, yeah. Racial understanding. But the attention on the family just skyrocketed. Ironically, for all the wrong reasons, as we now know.
It's such a chilling irony, this image of compassion, and it brought even more eyes onto a family where so much suffering was hidden.
Jennifer turned down invitations for them to go on talk shows. Said she wanted to protect Devante's privacy.
And she pulled back from social media for a while after that, too.
Yeah, for about 6 months, she went pretty quiet online. It's hard not to see that as, trying to step back from the spotlight, maybe avoid more scrutiny.
So 2017, another move.
Yep. This time to a really remote spot near Woodland, Washington.
And the neighbors there, the DeCalls, Bruce and Dana, they noticed things too.
They did. They saw this pattern of just extreme isolation, kids hardly ever seen outside, blinds always drawn, just this intense secrecy.
And then Hannah. She runs away.
Yeah, this desperate, brave act. She runs to the DeCalls' house late at night.
And she tells them things.
She does. She was clearly terrified. Apparently missing some teeth, which was a visible sign. She begged them not to make her go back. Talked about abuse, even racism in the house.
God. And Jennifer's reaction when she comes to get her.
Same pattern. Dismisses Hannah's story, says she's making it up, blames it on behavioral issues from, prenatal drug exposure.
Always an excuse, always deflecting, and then there was that apology note from Hannah.
Yeah, handwritten note saying she lied for attention. Feels, very likely coerced, doesn't it? Another layer of manipulation.
And even though Dana's father reported all this Hannah running away, the allegations, nothing happened.
No follow-up. Another critical failure in the system, it seems.
And then Devante starts asking the neighbor, Bruce, for food.
Increasingly, yes. Culminating in that heartbreaking list. A written list of food he desperately needed.
And he asked Bruce to hide it so his moms wouldn't find out.
Yeah. It just starkly shows how severe the food situation was for these kids, how deprived they were.
So Dana, the neighbor, she finally calls child services again.
She does. March 23rd, 2018. The very next day, March 24th, a caseworker goes to the house.
But no one answers.
No answer. And by the morning of the 25th, the family's GMC Yukon is gone.
Just gone. These are the last awful pieces falling into place.
Exactly.
March 26th, a friend of Sarah's reports her missing. She hadn't heard from her since early on the 24th when Sarah texted saying she felt sick.
And that same day, March 26th, is when that German tourist finds the SUV down on the rocks. Highway 1.
The crash scene itself, it told a story, didn't it?
It really did. The SUV upside down, base of that huge cliff. And crucially, investigators found no skid marks on the road above.
Meaning no sign of trying to stop, suggests it wasn't accidental.
Strongly suggests it was deliberate.
And the GPS data from the car confirmed the route.
Yeah, showed Jennifer driving down the Oregon coast into California, showed them stopping at that gravel turnout near Fort Bragg.
And then?
And then, deliberate acceleration, up to about 90 miles per hour, straight off the cliff.
Yeah.
No braking whatsoever.
Just drove straight off. And nobody was wearing a seatbelt.
Nobody. It paints this just devastating picture of intent.
And the toxicology reports.
They cemented it. Jennifer's blood alcohol level was way over the limit.
And Sarah and some of the kids.
Sarah and 2 of the children had high levels of diphenhydramine. That's the active ingredient in Benadryl in their systems.
Benadryl. Why?
Well, chillingly, internet searches found on their devices. They included things like how much Benadryl is fatal,
Oh my God.
and searches about death by hypothermia too. It just removes any doubt about this being premeditated, a planned, horrific event.
So after the crash, there's this massive search for the 3 missing children.
A huge search effort. Sierra's body was found relatively soon, April 8th.
But Devontae and Hannah.
Devontae's death was eventually confirmed, though his body wasn't recovered in the same way. And Hannah's remains, they weren't identified until January 2019.
And there was some inconclusive evidence. A shoe.
Yeah, a child's shoe with some bone fragments found later. Forensic testing was inconclusive, adding another layer of just unresolved sorrow.
So the official finding, the inquest jury in April 2019, what did they rule?
Unanimous decision. They ruled that Jennifer and Sarah Hart deliberately drove off that cliff, intending to kill themselves and intending to kill all 6 of their children.
So the children's deaths were ruled homicides.
Correct. Homicides.
And the investigators' theory, their belief, was that it all came down to fear.
Yeah, the belief was they were terrified. Their abuse was finally about to be exposed by the authorities.
Decided, yet they couldn't have the children.
Then nobody could. Just this final, awful assertion of control.
The whole case just sparked this huge national outrage, didn't it? And reopened debates about child welfare systems.
Absolutely necessary debates about the serious flaws, the gaps in oversight and intervention.
And the perspective from the children's biological family, their aunt's lawyer.
Yeah, he raised that devastating question. How could the state take these kids from their birth family, supposedly for safety, only to place them somewhere so dangerous, ultimately fatal? It really highlights the systemic failures.
And the story of their birth mother, Sherry Davis. It's just heartbreaking.
Absolutely tragic. She'd worked so hard, apparently, to overcome her own issues and just held on to this hope of getting her kids back one day.
This whole case, as our source material lays out so clearly, it's just this haunting, gut-wrenching example.
How perfectly crafted appearances can hide the most horrific reality. Years of abuse suffered by children behind closed doors.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it leaves you with just this profound sense of sadness, doesn't it?
Utterly. The senseless loss of 6 young lives, killed by the very people meant to protect them.
And it forces you to confront that chilling contrast, the image they showed the world, versus the monstrous reality the kids lived through.
And it absolutely shines a harsh light on those systemic failures, the missed chances within the child welfare system.
Yeah, all those reports were made, serious concerns raised multiple times, but the interventions just weren't enough. The warning signs were missed, or maybe dismissed.
Which really demands we think critically about how we strengthen those systems, how we make them truly protect vulnerable kids.
And maybe that brings us to a final thought for you listening.
Yeah, I mean, how well do we ever really know what's going on in the lives of people around us, even those who seem fine?
And are we paying enough attention? Are we willing to see potential warning signs even when everything looks okay on the surface?
This tragedy is just such a stark reminder, isn't it, of the complexities within families and just how absolutely crucial it is to have strong, responsive child protection systems that put children's safety first. Always.